If you have an existing ASP.NET MVC4 application, I'll show you some tips for updating to version 5. I have a site right now running under ASP.NET MVC4, and I'd like to move this into MVC version 5. I have the source code loaded up in Visual Studio. It's running here on my development server, and it is running MVC version 4. I can verify that just by going to packages.config and seeing that the MVC4 NuGet package installed is version 4. And I wish I could give you perfect step-by-step instructions to update your application. But one of the places where there can be a lot of variation is when it comes to updating your NuGet packages, because a large part of getting this website running under MVC5 is to update all the NuGet packages. And with NuGet, it really depends on what you have installed, because with NuGet, there can be lots of intertwined dependencies, and you might need to update something, but it's incompatible with a newer version of this other component. Sometimes that can all be a little bit frustrating, so the only real advice I can give you is please be careful and make sure you have your project under source control or have a backup for it, so you can always undo this if you find yourself blocked into a corner for some reason. I don't have a lot of NuGet packages installed, and the ones I do are pretty mainstream and well supported, so this should work for me pretty well. But before I even get into updating NuGet packages, I want to update the version of the .NET framework that my website is using. I need to do this for all 3 projects. I have a core project, a unit test project, and a web project. They're currently all targeting .NET Framework 4 because back when I wrote this site, my host only supported version 4 of the .NET Framework, and that's something you would probably want to check on. Does your production environment support .NET 4.5.1? But you'll need to move to at least .NET Framework 4.5. And now that all of those are changed, it is time to manage NuGet packages. I want to manage NuGet packages at the solution level because I want the ability to select a package and update it in perhaps several different projects. And before I go into updates, there's one little piece that is a good demonstration of why NuGet can sometimes be frustrating, and that is this particular NuGet package, microsoft.aspnet.web.helpers.mvc. This package has been renamed for version 3, and it's version 3 that works with MVC5. And because it's been renamed, I cannot just go into the updates and say, update this NuGet package. There is no update for it. I also cannot just leave it in the project because of the dependencies that it has. It will block other NuGet updates from happening. So what I need to do is uninstall this package, then do my updates and come back in later and reinstall the new version. At this point, I'm just doing uninstallation. That will allow my other updates to go through. So now that the helpers are out of the way, which by the way I use in the website, it has some nice features in it. It can provide CAPTCHA features. I use it for gravatars on the website. With that out of the way, I can come into the updates. Now I can roll the dice and just say update all. That would be like going into the package manager console and saying update package. When you run update package without any parameters, it tries to update all of your packages, which might not be what you want to happen. You can certainly try it, see if it works, but I know for my website there's going to be a couple problems that won't immediately be obvious perhaps. For instance, Twitter Bootstrap, my site currently, it's using Twitter Bootstrap version 2 or version 2.2, and if I say update all, I'll get Bootstrap version 3. Unfortunately, Bootstrap version 3 has some breaking changes. It will break the layout of my site, so I don't want to update everything. I want to stick with Twitter Bootstrap version 2 for now. I'll come back later and update that. I just want to focus on getting certain core assemblies updated and getting the website running and making sure all the features still work. And of course, one of those assemblies would be the ASP.NET MVC assembly. I want to update that. That's going to bring in some other NuGet packages and update them. That will go into the website. Let's browse through here and see what else I want to update. I want the latest version of the entity framework. And let's also go for Web API version 2. My strategy is to try to stick with some of the top-level packages like MVC, Web API, Entity Framework. They will update some of the other packages that I have in these projects. But if I try to update some of the dependencies first, that's one of the situations where you can get out of sync sometimes. For instance, if I tried to update JSON.NET and then update Web API, there's a pretty good chance it will work, but I've also seen those types of situations break because the web API has a dependency on JSON.NET. It might have a dependency on a specific version of JSON.NET. So it's better to update the web API and let it pick the packages that it wants to update. And so now I've updated MVC, updated web API, updated entity framework. That's going to update my packages.config, and I can see MVC5 in here now. The two other important pieces to note are that the Razor assembly, the Razor package, is now at version 3, and the web pages assembly now at version 3. And those are the three big version numbers you have to remember. MVC goes from 4 to 5, Razor goes from 2 to 3, and web pages goes from 2 to 3. We'll need to know that because I also need to update some of my config files. For instance, in web.config, I need to say we're now using web pages version 3. I also need to come down here where we have some of the assembly redirects, and web pages goes from version 2 to version 3. MVC goes from version 4 to version 5. And the entity framework dependent assembly, I'm actually not sure why that's in here. I'm going to remove it. I think those are the only changes in the top level web.config. You probably know there's also a web.config in the views folder that controls all of the Razor configuration. And inside of here, there will be some version numbers. Remember, the Razor assembly goes from version 2 to version 3. The Razor assembly here goes from version 2 to version 3. And one more change, it looks like, version 3 here also. And this looks like an MVC reference that will go to version 5. And then just a few more down here in the pages section. But that should be all the changes that are needed for the web.config in the views folder. Now, before I forget, I need to reinstall that package that I uninstalled, the helpers package. Actually, I could go ahead and do a build. And the only one error here that is significant is that the namespace helpers does not exist. And that is because of that helpers package, which is good news that there weren't any other errors. So let me go online and search for microsoft.aspnet.webhelpers. This is version 3 of that package. That's the one that I want. It works with web pages version 3 or greater. Let's install that. And now one more thing. I need to modify the CS_proj file. And the way I can do that is right-click the web project and say unload project. What I want to do here is remove a GUID that is specific to ASP.NET MVC. So I can edit this CS_proj file in Visual Studio if I unload it first. And with ASP.NET, there's no longer a need for a GUID that identifies this project as an MVC project. With this version of ASP.NET, there's only ASP.NET projects. And you can easily have web forms and MVC and web API all combined together. And the GUID that I want to remove is the one that starts with E3E and ends with BE47. I just can remove that GUID from here, save the project, reload it, set this as my startup project. Let's try a build with fingers crossed. Build succeeds. Let's hit Control F5 with more fingers crossed, and I'm now running with ASP.NET MVC5. So the core things to remember there are, make sure you're using .NET Framework 4.5 or above, update your NuGet packages, but be careful, update your web.config files, both the root web.config and one in the views folder if you have one there, and most MVC applications do. And then finally, you can remove that GUID from the project, and you'll be good to go. I should be able to treat this as an MVC5 application. I know it's running with MVC5 at runtime, but I can also see that I can add new scaffolded items, and I get the new scaffolding interface in Visual Studio 2013. We'll see that throughout the rest of the course.